and welcome back to my vlog. If you hear a little conversation and the noise, there's cooking going on in the kitchen in the next room over. So anyway, I'm going to read today for those of you who wake up in the morning and say, how am I going to get through this day? James Thurber, How to Get Through the Day. How do you get through the day? A woman out in Iowa has asked me in a letter. I can't tell whether she wants help in getting through her own day, or whether she has made a wager with somebody that I don't get through my own day at all, but somehow contrive to get around it. The truth is that I do get through the day, and if it will benefit anybody, I shall be glad to state how I manage it. It might be simpler to put my method in the form of rules. 1. Never answer a telephone that rings before breakfast. It is sure to be one of 3 types of persons that is calling. A strange man in Minneapolis who has been up all night and is phoning collect. A salesman who wants to come over and demonstrate a new, patented combination dictaphone and music box that also cleans rugs. Or a woman out of one's past. Just let the phone ring. The woman would be sure to say, "This is Thelma Terwilliger. What are you going to do about me?" If you talk to her before your orange juice and coffee, or even afterward for that matter, you will never get through the day. Professors Radnor and Grube, in their monumentally depressing treatise, The Female of the Species, list a total of 1,113 possible involvements with a woman, all but 8 of them ranging from the untoward to the inextricable. 2. If you want to keep your breakfast down, do not read the front page or any page of the morning newspaper. 15 years ago, the late Professor Herman Allen Miller of Ohio State University wrote me that, out there, no news was the only good news. He would be saddened, but not surprised, to learn that nowadays no news is the only good news anywhere. It is better to dip into the last days of Pompeii than to peruse the morning paper at breakfast. But what I do is turn on WQXR for classical or semi-classical music, or WPAT for popular music out of the late lamented American past, such songs, for example, as Whispering, Sleepy Time Gal, Sunny, and Honey, Honey, Bless Your Heart. If you have been foolish enough to talk with Thelma, the last 2 songs will probably become Money and Money, Money, Bless Your Heart. One morning, by mistake, I got another station than WPAT and listened, relaxed, to a recording of People Will Say We're in Love, sung by Alfred Drake and Joan Roberts, when suddenly it terminated and a young detergent voice began yelling, "Don't knock rock and roll, it's a rockin' good way to mess around and fall in love." What have we done to deserve this? Or should I say, what have we done not to deserve it? 3. Avoid the 10 o'clock news on the radio, at all costs. It is always confined to disasters, automobile accidents involving 17 cars, the fatal stabbing of a 14-year-old girl by her 12-year-old sweetheart, attacks on young mothers in Brooklyn basements, and riotous demonstrations by 15,000 students in Graustark. It is comforting, in a vaguely uneasy way, to realize that American students do not engage in political demonstrations, but reserve their passions for panty raids, jazz festivals, and the hanging of football coaches in effigy. 4. Do not open the morning mail when it arrives if you are alone in the house. If I am alone when my mail arrives around 11 o'clock, I wait for my wife to get back from the hairdresser. If she says, "God," or "Oh no," after glancing at a letter, I hastily tell her to send it on to our lawyer or our agent without reading it to me. I now get about 12 letters every morning, and she is happy if not more than 2 of them call for wedding presents. About 7 of the 12 always call for something, and you ought to consider yourself lucky that you are not me. I am asked to read something, to write something, to send something, to do something, to explain something, or to go somewhere. These letters invariably begin like this: "I realize that you are a very busy man, but," and they always end, "Thank you for your time and trouble." I am pleased to report that at least 2 letters every day are intelligent, warm, and even humorous, and that they almost invariably come from American wives and mothers unknown to me, who frequently say, "I love you." This cheers me up enormously until I begin thinking about Thelma Terwilliger again. 5. Some years ago, a distinguished American woman physician recommended a nap after lunch and a nip before dinner. I myself do not recommend the nap after lunch, except for infants. My researches among those who have tried it show that 80% of the males and 100% of the females just lie there wide-eyed, strumming the headboard with their fingers and or, as the lawyers say, moaning low. Among the thoughts that keep Americans awake are, but why should I list them, sleepless reader, when you know what they are as well as I do? As for the nip before dinner, I'm all for it, unless it leads to a nipping that doesn't end until after 3 o'clock in the morning. Speaking of tranquilizers, which everybody always is, I do not turn to Milltown, but to Milton, and to some of the other bards sublime, and a few of the humbler poets. Because of the distressing process of mental association, however, poetry is not always a help. The other morning, for example, I got to Edna St. Vincent Millay's "There isn't a train I wouldn't take, no matter where it's going," when it suddenly turned into "There isn't a train that I can take, no matter where I'm going." This disturbing paraphrase grew out of a 7-week period of travel in the Middle West last winter, during which I had to be driven by car from Columbus, Ohio to Detroit because the only train out of the Ohio capital for the great Michigan city leaves at 4 a.m. I also found it simpler to be driven from Detroit to Cleveland, since railroad transportation in the Middle West has regressed to about where it was at the time of Custer's last stand. The trouble with turning to verse while nipping before dinner, especially in a public place like the lobby of the Hotel Algonquin, is that one is likely to grow irritable or even bitter instead of leaning back and relaxing in one's chair. A playwright I know, who tried repeating lines of Longfellow to himself in the Algonquin lobby at 6 o'clock one evening, was abruptly impelled, while nipping his 4th martini, to accost a strange lady and proclaim, "I say the struggle not availeth, madam," after which he turned to a male stranger and snarled, "Life is but an empty dream, Mac." He then returned to his own chair. All of a sudden he spotted a poet across the lobby, and he was upon him in a moment, saying, "Hell with thee, blithe spirit, bard, thou never wert." When the rude fellow later told me proudly that what he had said, I could only snarl on my own 4th nip before dinner, "I am glad you did not once see Shelley plain and did not stop and talk to him." 6. This brings us to the dinner hour and the problem of getting through that. Here everybody has to work out his own system of getting his dinner down and keeping it down. Dinner table conversation should be selected with great care nowadays, since the first 17 subjects that spring to mind are likely to be gloomy, running from the muddle-fuddle of international relations to the dangers of cholesterol and diester stilvesterol. And if you don't know what they are, I'm not going to tell you. My wife and I, Monday through Friday, usually dine in our own home with 13.5 million and 1 Americans. The 13.5 million members of the CIOAF of L, who sponsor the commentator Edward P. Morgan on WABC at 7 p.m., and Mr. Morgan himself. The good, strong voice of Elmer Davis is no longer heard in the land, but Mr. Morgan carries on ably in his stead, with the same intelligence, devotion to American ideals, courage, and wit. One night, during Christmas week of 1959, he discussed the lavish, expensive, and empty celebration of Holy Week and said, "We seem to forget that Christ was born in a manger and not in the Bethlehem Hilton." It is a thought to remember. 7. Tender is the night no more, as we all know, especially the summer night, and when it falls, I always think of Robert Benchley's provocative title, "What to Do When It Gets Dark." Most married couples, I have found out, totter to the television set and turn it on, but I would rather read something restful instead, like The Naked and the Dead. It is perhaps enough to say of the Westerns, that endless series of morbid discharges, that they inspired a certain little girl's definition of a hung jury as 12 men hanging from a tree. As for the police bang-bangs, they seem more and more given over to the theory that most killers in our society are women, so that as soon as a demure wife or ex-wife appears on the scene, you can be pretty sure that she did it. She usually confesses at the end in a quiet voice, saying simply, "Yes, Lieutenant, I killed him." This may not give you the creeps, but it gives me the creeps. 8. This brings us to Betty Bye. Well, good night, and I pray the Lord your soul to keep. My own nocturnal problem in the summertime consists of flying creatures, great big June bugs, or bang sashes. One of them banged the sash of the window nearest my bed around midnight in July, and I leaped out of sleep and out of bed. "It's just a bat," said my wife reassuringly, and I sighed with relief. "Thank God for that," I said. "I thought it was a human being." So there's James Thurber on how to make it through the day. And I hope you made it through this one. And I bumped the table so my camera shook. And YouTube will tell me, "Your video looks shaky. Should we try to correct it?" And I will ignore them. Make it a great day, and bye for now.